So my name is Trish. I'm 36 years old. I grew up in Shelbyville, between Shelbyville, Indiana and Greensburg, Indiana, in a little town, St. Omer. That was only after I had moved probably 5 or 6 times from the time I was born until around the approximate time that things started to somewhat settle down in my life or in my childhood. I had a mother who chose to drop my sister and I off at my grandmother's whenever she felt like going away or taking a break or a vacation from being a mother. So I'm assuming that that's probably around the time that I started to feel some sense of loss of love, like I didn't have love from my mom, especially my mother. My father was in and out of my life only whenever my mother would decide that she wanted to come around and be a mom. So my sister and I struggled a lot with that. I was always the protector for my sister, so I felt like I had to be strong every second of every minute of every day of my childhood. I remember one of my first memories being about 4 years old. My mother had moved in with a woman and she had a couple of children where her daughter was 18 years old. And her daughter, I remember, would take me in the bathroom, her parents' bathroom at that. It was at the farthest end of where we lived. And she would turn the water on just to make it trickle, just enough to where it sounded like someone was using the restroom. And that was my first real memory being a child, being a girl, being something other than a child, I guess you would say. Like, she felt like I was her body to play with. So that was my first experience as a child, a little girl. A memory of my babysitter molesting me in the bathroom. I don't remember how long it lasted, but I do remember it was a while. Her mother was abusive, verbally and physically. Anytime we would ever ask to go to the neighbor's house or go somewhere, we would get whipped. There was a lot of physical violence. I don't know why. I don't ever remember what I did to deserve the abuse that I got. From 6, 7, and 8, my mother married this gentleman. I can't say his name, I'm not going to, but it was in Columbus, Indiana. And he was very, very, very physically and verbally abusive to my sister, myself, and my mother. Mainly towards my mother. The only time that my sister and I would ever get abused would be whenever my mother would leave to go to work. My sister and I would always be in trouble. And I always mention my sister and I because she went through this all with me. And I feel like she's the only reason why I was able to stay strong through my childhood and make it, because I was always there to protect her. She was tiny. She was little. I always felt like I had to take care of her. Well, he was abusive. Probably 2-3 years. I remember a memory, the police showing up one night, and my mother and my stepfather coming out of their rooms. They were naked. They had been fighting. I don't know why my mom didn't have any clothes on, but she didn't. And I remember her telling us to go in the other room, which would have been my sister and I's bedroom, except for there was a grow room in there. There were marijuana plants everywhere. Lights in the closet here, lights in the closet there, marijuana plants all over here. And so we didn't have a room growing up. But the abuse, the physical abuse was awful. The last time I remember spending time with him was whenever the neighbor called the police because they could hear us yelling help from like 2 apartments down because he was being so physically abusive towards my sister and I. And so my mother got out of that. That's when we moved to St. Paul. That's when life was starting to get stable. That was around 9 or 10. Like I said, life was pretty decent. My sister and I had, stability. We had discipline. My mother worked every day. We were happy. We were finally happy. And it was just my mom, me, and my sister. And so my mom brought this man home one day from work. She had met him. I remember my grandmother telling me something about how not to trust him. Don't be alone with him. Well, she introduced him as this wonderful man. He worked with her. He would take care of us. He would help us. He would make sure that we were taken care of. No more worries for the rest of our life. I was excited. I didn't listen to my grandmother. I thought that maybe my mom was telling me the truth for once. And so we moved in with him. I was probably 10 years old. As soon as we moved in with him, this was in just a tiny little town, so we didn't have really access to go into town to see anyone or get any help or tell anyone. We were always stuck in this house. We weren't allowed to go anywhere. we went to school. I tried to be in school activities. My mom really wouldn't let us. For some reason, she would harbor herself in the bedroom with him. I know they were smoking marijuana. I could smell it. I know what that smell is now. And but for years things were okay, except for the fact that my mother and I just kept getting worse and worse. We kept butting heads more and more, while my sister and my mother were getting closer. The same with my stepdad. They were just getting closer. And so I just kind of felt like I was out of place, and I knew that the one place I could go to was my grandmother's house. And so my grandmother, I moved in with her because my mother would try to report me as a runaway all the time, or try to put me in girls' school or juvenile detention. And so finally my grandmother got tired of that and took me in. And, things were pretty decent, except for my grandmother thought that the older I got, I would be better with my mother, so she sent me back to my mother's house. Again, butted heads, while my sister, my mother, and my stepdad just kept getting closer, and I didn't understand why. And so, like I said, I just kind of felt pushed away. I didn't feel like I was a part of the family, except for at my grandmother's house. That felt good. That felt normal for me. It felt stable. And so, the first time I was ever offered marijuana, I was 15 years old. And I thought, oh, hey, this is really cool. Why not? I want to fit in. I finally felt like I fit in somewhere because I was doing the same things that the popular kids were doing. And so that was the first time I ever did any type of mind-altering substance, was when I tried marijuana. At that time, that's all I did, just smoked marijuana. It made me feel, I don't know, I was high. I was on a high all the time. I didn't have to feel that separation of love from my family and myself. So I stayed high continually on marijuana. That's when I discovered, drinking alcohol as well. So I would hang out with my friends in town, or I would just not tell my mother, not leave and go to town and hang out with my friends. Well, that led to a party with one of my really good friends, and I felt again like I fit in. There were 8 men, but there were 2 girls. Obviously, I knew that I should have known something wasn't right then. Well, obviously, they asked to fix our drinks, and when they fixed our drinks, that's when my very, very first, I believe, my triggering trauma happened. That's when I was 15, and they took myself and my friend, and they tied us up to mattresses, and they took their turns doing what they wanted to do to both of us. And that was my first, I guess you would say, kind of out of body experience. For me, it was a I sat back and I watched. And I didn't know, I had no control over my body ever again after that. It wasn't mine anymore. And that's when, after that, I just stopped. I feel like that's the first time I lost my innocence. That's the first time that I ever felt like I didn't want to be alive again. That's the first time that I ever felt like fitting in involved that's what I had to do to fit in, was to use my body as the special part of me that made me, who they wanted to be around. And after that, that's when I started to drink a lot. I drank a lot every day. I'd smoked marijuana a lot every day. I still had not been offered, and I still did not do anything harder than that. But that again led to another situation when I was 16 years old, where I went to a farm party, and I went with someone from church, which is the worst thing that I feel like could have ever done, because he was there to protect me, but I started drinking, and he became embarrassed, and he left me. And so, again, I was taken advantage of by multiple men that shouldn't have happened, probably 8 to 10 men. Then on the way home, one of the gentlemen that was friends with him took advantage of me as well and dropped me off. And after that, my life, I dove myself into sports and being popular and having a lot of friends, and I just didn't think about it anymore. When I was 18, I met my son's father. I had my son, and I didn't even smoke cigarettes when I was pregnant with him. I loved him so much, and he saved my life, because I didn't feel like I had a purpose until I had him, or became pregnant with him, I mean. And so he, in a sense, changed my life. I was an amazing mother. I was such a good mom. And then I decided that while his father was in basic training, I would leave him for my very first girlfriend. because after all of the damage that had been done by these men, I did not want to involve myself with another man again. And so I started dating my first girlfriend, and from the beginning, she was physically violent towards myself and my son. It was such a tumultuous relationship. I just remember it was terrible. I mean, it was degrading and demeaning, and I lost my self-worth. Well, I had gotten into trouble and was on house arrest, so I had to be good. And I did my house arrest all the while, and then she would go next door to our friend's house and get high and do drugs. I was doing amazing. I had to. I was forced to. Until my 21st birthday, I was offered, well, what they called it then was crank. Probably methamphetamine now, or ice, or go. And that was the first time that I ever did anything that made me feel like I was superwoman. I could do anything. I forgot about every bad thing that ever happened in my life. I felt like I was euphoric. It was euphoric. It was the best feeling ever. And so that was the first taste of my downfall. I feel like I could say, like, that was it. After that, I was offered pills. I tried pills. After that, I was offered, it was always methamphetamine, but or crank or go or Xanax or whatever it was, I took it. I didn't care what it was after that. I didn't have to think anymore. I didn't have to think about the years of being taken advantage of and the years of not feeling wanted or loved or needed or any of that. And so I didn't have to think about it anymore. And that was awful. I look back now at it, and I wish that it never would have happened, but it makes me emotional. So, but as time went on, being a mother didn't matter anymore. So, but my girlfriend and I had gotten into an argument one time, and she left, and I slept with one of my friends, and I got pregnant with my daughter, and I didn't care. I didn't want her. I did it on purpose. I didn't want her at all. And I did drugs the entire time I was pregnant with her. And I gave her, well, it was my fault, but she had a medical condition due to my drug use. I had to have special surgeries for her. There were things that I did to her. I never hurt her, but there were things that she was around or that I could have been a better mom to her. But I didn't want her. I've never said that to anyone before, that I didn't want my little girl, but I didn't. And so I did drugs, I did pills, I did Xanax, I did anything that I could to numb the pain of being pregnant and forget that I didn't want this child, that I had gotten pregnant with. And so I had her, and my girlfriend and I got into a huge argument when she was probably 4 weeks old. And my girlfriend tried to kill me. She tried to run me over with the car. She beat me up outside of the apartment. My son was watching. He was 5 years old. He'll never forget that. He says it ruined his life, or his mindset. He'll never forget it. And she went to jail, and I moved away. I moved to Ohio. When I got to Ohio, I was 2008, I believe. So this is years of drug use. 9 years or so of drug use after that, off and on. I get to Ohio, and I hook up with the wrong people again, of course. And I'm still a mom, mind you, still trying to work. Well, it was awful. I started doing morphine pills. And the morphine pills were an everyday habit, all the while my children are suffering. I got a call from a teacher telling me that my son was dirty. I didn't check on my daughter for 24 hours one time because all I wanted to do was get high and forget. Probably a year into that substance abuse, I overdosed in front of my son, who was 8 years old, I believe. Yes, 8 years old at the time. And this was in 2010. And I was at a point right after that teacher called me to tell me that my son was dirty, that it was time to hold some accountability on myself. So I decided to let my children go. My son went with my mother. My daughter went with her father. And I decided to get clean and sober. And that was August 4th of 2010. Years of sobriety, years of amazing things, up and downs as always, but it was normal life. it was a great life. I didn't have any negatives, any regrets. I did amazing. And then last year, in 2019, I was introduced to someone who was a mutual friend of my girlfriend at the time and I's, and he sold, bought, and dealt methamphetamine. And my girlfriend at the time had cancer, stage 4 cancer. And I went through all this process of being able to keep my hands off of her medication, the opiates, my drug of choice, which was my downfall. Her and I had such a tumultuous relationship too. I mean, it wasn't her fault, it was mine. I let it control my life. But I fell victim to, well, not victim, but I fell into just a sense of feeling sorry for myself. But I was so cocky and so complacent with becoming this recovery rock star in a sense, and I let it get to my head. And when he offered it for the first time, I accepted. That was definitely, it's a regret that I regret every day. I felt like, oh, I'm going to celebrate. I just got a new job, an amazing job, something I never thought that I could ever obtain. And when I got this job, I wanted to, in my mind, this is the way I put it, I was going to congratulate myself. This was a reward for working hard, and it was right there. So I've been doing good all this time. I can try it one time and not touch it again. That was a lie. No, that methamphetamine last year took over my life. I let it take over my life, and it became a daily habit, a daily job in my mind to try to find something to make me forget about life yet again. And so I came to Cincinnati for training for this job, and I thought things were going great until one night I decided to go out with a friend, and who I thought was my friend anyway, and he put a Suboxone that I was supposed to be taking in my drink. I had been up for a few days from being on methamphetamine, and I remember one last thing, and the next thing that I remember, I woke up underneath a stairwell in Cincinnati with no recollection of any of what happened except for the pain. The pain mentally, the pain physically, the pain emotionally. I didn't know what happened. I didn't know what happened, and that's what bothered me the most. But it was a stairwell in a garage, a parking garage. And I remember just barely, it's foggy, but walking back to the bar that I was at. I shouldn't have even been out at a bar in Cincinnati, but I was out in a bar, and I walked back, and there he was laying asleep in my car. At that time, I had no recollection of what had happened. We went back to the hotel room. We fought again because he left me. I felt like he left me. And then we went back home. Well, my home at that time. My girlfriend kicked me out because I stayed out all night. And I came back to Shelbyville, Indiana. And from then on, it's been an up and down battle. This was probably, I want to say, November of last year. November of last year is when it happened. And then I came back a week later and received a text message from someone stating that they had my wallet and stating that I had been sold for 1 gram of dope to 4 black men for them to take advantage of me. And for me, I kind of didn't, I still don't know how to react to that. That was so recent. But that was due to my drug use. I know that now. I kept saying, well, it's their fault, it's their fault. Well, it's definitely my fault, but I didn't deserve it. But that was all due to my drug use. I have struggled still since last year, and today I'm 34 days clean and sober. And I'm going to do it right this time. I'm ready to be done with this life. I'm old, I'm tired. I just hope that whatever I've said in this video can help someone who's been through the same things that I've been through. You can do it. I'm, like I said, 34 days. I've done it. And if I can do it, anybody can do it. And you just have to have support and love and guidance from people that love you and care about you. And you have to believe in yourself. And I'm finally starting to believe in myself that I can do this, that I'm strong enough to be able to get through it. And so, but that's my story.